Hi. So I'm going to try discussing a book that I read recently or listened to that was quite insightful. So Stephen Levy is a great author. Has written quite a few books that are related to Silicon Valley. He's been a reporter for a long time, and I found his latest book about Facebook, The Untold Story, uh, to be quite fascinating, actually. So I am a little bit biased because I knew a couple of the stories before, stories about ZuckNet. Dr. Zuckerberg is one of my advisors, so he's told me stories about ZuckNet and about innovation and other things. Um, and of course, I'm also biased by, I've met Mark like once, and of course, I've met Dr. Z several times, and his wife Karen. They're wonderful people. I think the world of them. Very kind. So, you know, just full disclosure there. It is a little bit odd to read in a book about a person that you know. So, when they were talking about Dr. Z himself, and I was like, oh, I know him. Uh, but you know, there are other things that didn't make sense before. That didn't really reconcile. And some of the things, especially about Facebook, given the election and the constant coverage, um, I was definitely very interested in finding out more. Um, Another reason that I actually read the book is because the information, which I'm a subscriber to, proud subscriber to, they started a book club, and this was the very first book on their book club reading list, and I was really excited. I was even more excited when there was an audiobook version of it. I downloaded it right away as soon as it was available on Audible, and I started listening to it. And I travel a lot, so even though it was a pretty big book, it was 18 hours. Most of the books I listen to, it's crazy. Instead of counting pages, I count hours of audio. Most of the books I listen to are 7, 8 hours. Shorter books are 4 hours. This one was 18 hours, and it was so good, in fact, that I finished it within like a week. So whenever I got the chance, I was listening to it. I found myself sitting in my driveway yesterday, just listening to it, waiting to get to the end, and I did. So just some observations. I hope if you're planning on reading the book, I hope you've read it. There might be some spoilers in here, but then again, who doesn't know about Facebook, right? Who doesn't know about what's going on? When you read the book, or if you've ever seen Mark Zuckerberg around, you can tell that Stephen Levy generally likes him. And I can't blame him. He's a pretty likable guy. He's pretty down to earth. And as a hacker, I have a particular bias and affinity towards someone that's a fellow hacker. They get the hacker spirit. Like, I understand the critiques of, move fast and break things. Um, I'm a little bit older than Mark Zuckerberg, so, uh, you know, things aren't quite. I have some benefit of regular job and working in the government and whatnot, which tempered some of those move fast and break things instincts. But overall, I don't think it's a bad thing to move fast. Um, of course, you know, things such as, oh, young people are smarter. You only need one young people in your companies. Like, those are some of the things that I don't subscribe to. It's not true. And as an engineer, I've learned a lot from seasoned engineers, and I've also learned from younger engineers. For example, Unbound Energy, my first hackathon at a startup weekend. There were a couple of these 19-year-old programmers, the hackers, and they just coded for they just coded for 40 hours straight without sleeping, and then just like chugging back Red Bulls. Um, that's something that was interesting. I remember my early days when I would do things like that. Um, there's benefits to it, like when you're in the zone, just focus and get things done. There's also, you know, there's also shortcomings to it. Once you become a software architect, you realize the value of thinking things through, right? Um, that was actually a pretty interesting part of the book because as I talk about Mark Zuckerberg, his journey, you can tell he goes from, this hackerish mindset, let's do this, let's just build this thing, to where he starts architecting things. He starts seeing things a little bit further out. And it's clear he's a visionary. Even now, I think it's clear that he is a visionary. Um, what I found particularly interesting in the book is I think Stephen Levy was, trying to be balanced, and I think he was pretty balanced. It went between, this picture of Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, and others as just like human beings, good people who are trying to make a difference, who believe, who are idealistic, which was contrasted by, you know, things like the acquisition of Instagram, or as fierce competitors, or um, what I like to say, there was kind of a love, not so love relationship. Uh, Not a love hate relationship, mind you. I use that deliberately because I don't think there was really any hate in the book, um, which I noticed because there's a lot of Facebook hate out there right now. And I personally was, expecting there to be more negative content, but I think it was pretty well balanced. I don't think the author was trying to inject any point of view particularly. So I was going back and forth between like, hey, here's this like really awesome person, here's awesome people that are doing really cool things. The founder of Instagram, founder of Snapchat, and all this other stuff. All these other folks. And as an entrepreneur, it's kind of fun to listen to some of those stories, right? There's, the road less traveled. Obviously, I did not raise hundreds of millions of dollars or build a social media company. Um, that these folks have, and just to find out about their interactions, how they thought about it, and also to realize that as much as we like to think things are under control, you have the right people at the helm, you have this executive and that executive and all that. Yeah, all of those things are good, but at the end of the day, the world is pretty unpredictable. You don't know how things are going to turn out, and I personally feel that the most you can really do is just try, and try to be true to yourself, try to be a good person, and what else are you going to do but do what you think is best at the moment. And I feel like that comes across in the book, where Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, they genuinely do believe that they're the best people to you know to grow Facebook and to have a global impact. And it's definitely interesting to see. For me, this was very interesting, is because in Silicon Valley, there's this whole like numbers, metrics driven, focus, but you can tell how mission driven these folks are. Even when Facebook wasn't as big as it is today, the earnings, the metrics are great, um, but even like in 2008, 2009, um, when it wasn't as big, the vision gave them clarity. What I thought was interesting was, the engine for revolutions. Um, I don't know how you monetize revolutions, but you know, it didn't seem like monetizing revolutions was front and center. And even now, it's kind of refreshing to know, well, yeah, there's all this crazy ad tracking and stuff, but the ad tracking, at least in the minds of the executives there, helps enable newer, better technology. Of course, there's darker sides to it. There's the unforeseen things, like what would happen to content moderation, and just the effects of large scale technological changes like that. Um, but you know, as a founder myself, I think of those things as well, and also as a technologist, I worked on things that, in retrospect, you know, haunt me. But and most of the times, as an engineer, when I'm working on something, or as a creator, when I'm building something, I don't necessarily think through all the impacts of it, or what could be. I worked at this startup called Superchips that was awesome. I loved it. Like, they had to kick us out, but I'm sure that the modifications may have affected some folks negatively. Um, I thought it was a pretty benign product. It made your car go faster. You get to hack cars. I'm a car guy, so I absolutely loved it. But I got tickets from when I was working at Super Chips for going too fast. And of course, then more recently, there were, reports of how Jeeps and these systems with OnStar could be hacked by a hacker um, who can do things that are pretty terrible, like not just stop your car, but maybe crash your car while you're in it. So that's something I think a lot of technologists grapple with, right? On the one hand, your technology can do a lot of good. On the other hand, every innovation has the possibility of creating, you know, just the opposite. So I think that's another reason why introspecting is really important and thinking about it. It definitely sounds like, you know, uh, the folks are in and around Facebook do introspect a lot about their impact. And from the book, it definitely also sounded like they were very surprised by some of the things that happened. Um, the election of Trump wasn't, premeditated by Facebook. Um, and it also raises other questions like, oh my God, like, this thing that you created, did you ever think it would have that kind of power? It clearly does. And now that people know about it, can it be weaponized, right? Uh, Especially for someone like me, I never really got into social media. One of the big reasons for that is because I just I just said, like, yeah, I have friends that I can go visit and hang out with. I was wary of just always posting like fake updates of yourself. Clearly, the folks a few years after me feel differently, um, and I didn't think it could be manipulated into something like seriously evil. And now, I think the whole world was grappling with, hey, could this really be that evil? Um, on the ads thing, it was actually quite enlightening to know about how Facebook ads work and how it evolved over time. One of the one of the things that I personally have been wondering about is, you know, how does it compare to Google AdWords? I'm a big fan of Google AdWords. Of course, I made a lot of money doing Google AdWords or AdWords automation. Um, Even though I never thought I would. I was a typical geek who did not like marketing until I realized, you know, everything's not so black and white. So when I first interacted with Facebook's ad platform, I wondered how good it would be, and of course, the very first time I used it, there was a bunch of bots and a bunch of random clicks. So it's interesting to hear Facebook's story and kind of reconcile that with my own experiences with Facebook and Facebook ads. Um, one of my companies currently, one of the companies that I own a part of, currently invests very heavily in Facebook ads, and they have crazy attribution. You know that's a big part of what I do is attribution, and the attribution's been showing that Facebook ads do work. It helps you target the people that you want to get to, and it delivers a lot of value. But compared to Google AdWords, it was like comparing apples to oranges. Initially, I thought they were just direct head-on competitors, but the way you optimize a Facebook ad or a Facebook campaign is very different from how you optimize a Google AdWords campaign. And it started to make sense. I'm not very familiar with Facebook's newsfeed and other things, but the book actually was surprisingly insightful. And I think I'm going to prescribe it as must read for anybody who's a marketer. um, at least for the marketing folks on any teams I interact with, if you're considering Facebook to be a significant part of your marketing going forward, I think the book would be, yeah, like it's a must read. You have to know how Facebook ads got to where it is, why it got tightened down, why it got locked down, the whole content moderation problem they're dealing with, and also where they're going, right? So if you want to stay ahead of the curve, this is like hearing straight from the horse's mouth. And Yeah, and then some, right? Understanding the implications of all of it. It'll certainly be a very interesting, you know, year. There's all of these things going on, coronavirus and the elections, and I'm sure based on what happened in 2016 elections, there's a whole bunch of marketing firms that are going to try to manipulate Facebook ads, and Facebook as a platform. Um, and honestly, the verdict is still out how effective it is, right? But the marketing and the news spread, um, funny enough, virality cuts both ways, even for Facebook. And the, this latest trend of Cambridge Analytica and whatnot, I personally feel some of it is a little bit more inflated than reality. You can certainly do some crazy things with targeting. I've definitely seen how targeting certain people, targeting specific demographics, right, can yield the results that you want. There is something to social engineering, but you know, can it really, can it really turn people hateful? I think it can definitely amplify negative messages, right? There's definitely systemic issues, but whether Cambridge Analytica actually stole the 2016 election is, I think it's a matter of more marketing for firms like Cambridge Analytica. I've thought about it for a bit. I was like, hey, maybe I should. That's what I should do. Like, find one of these firms and just capitalize on both sides. Republicans, Democrats will be your Cambridge Analytica. Yes, those are some of my evil thoughts. I'm not going to do that. But yeah, it was certainly a very insightful book. I loved how it was written. I loved how it gave differing perspectives. Being me, I certainly didn't agree with what the how the author assessed things. I think the author assessed things from, they have their own bias. But I think that it was a pretty good portrait of, the story or the stories, many stories behind Facebook. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, finding out more about it as an entrepreneur myself, as a programmer, as a geek, and one who moved to Silicon Valley. My Silicon Valley experience has certainly been very different from Mark Zuckerberg's or his entire crew's. I live in a different place. I love living in California. I've got this beautiful view. I try to be more active, and yeah, like everybody's journey is their own. So it was refreshing to read about someone else's journey, and I'm kind of happy that my journey is different, and it's been fun.